Jarvis. Who was it that said war is hell? Yes, I believe that was American Civil War General William Sherman. Yeah, you're right. Is War Machine any good? I meant to call the game by its full name, Manhattan Project War Machine. One of the longest board game names ever. Leave a comment down below of some other fantastically long board game titles. War Machine is a dice-chucking engine-building game with a nice follow mechanism. And by that, I mean when the active player takes an action, oftentimes the other players at the table will get to take a similar but lesser action, kind of minimizing the downtime between turns. And I really enjoy it when games do that. Review copy provided by the publisher, and Marcy would like to let you know that for every person that subscribes, she receives a pepperoni stick. So click subscribe. And what is the goal of this game? Well, you guessed it. That's to have the most victory points by the end of the game. And the game will take course over 6, 5, or maybe 4 rounds, depending on the number of players. As the board clearly shows here in a 1 and 2 player game, there will be 6 rounds, 3 players, there will be 5 rounds, and you just have to make the assumption that with 4 players, you play 4 rounds. That is noted in the rulebook. However, it would have been kind of nice to go ahead and put a little symbol there letting you know that it's 4 rounds for a 4-player game. They took the time to do that with the 1 and 2 and 3 players, but just butts. And players will be accumulating points throughout the game, keeping track of them down here. They will also gain a ton of points by upgrading different parts of their board. Each one of these little modular sections of your board can be upgraded, which is pretty interesting. Players will also receive a government grant card at the beginning of the game, and this is kind of like in-game or like a goal that you can try to achieve to gain even more points. And players will also receive a company card at the beginning of the game, and these will give the players asymmetrical powers. And the game comes with a whole slew of them, so it kind of mixes it up each game. At the start of the game, players will receive 3 dice. They can gain more dice throughout the game by upgrading this portion of their board. That will give them extra dice, and it will also give them bonus points at the end of the game, both of which are fantastic things to have. During their turn, a player will roll their dice. These dice act as workers, kind of like a worker placement action selection combination mechanism thing going on here. Each time I roll the dice, I do have to keep one of the dice. I could keep more if I wish, but I have to keep at least 1, but then I can re-roll them and try to get the results that I need. These nuclear symbols, these are wild, which is great, but it's also kind of bad because every time you get one of these, you gain a waste token, and these will ding you a point at the end of the game. However, there are ways to turn these over and they become a positive point. So depending on what dice you roll, or maybe what buildings or extra options, those can actually kind of be to your benefit, but it's a little risky. The die results are kind of busted into 2 different things. There's the worker actions, which are the top hat, the wrench, and the star. There's the nuclear that is wild, but then some of them have just an energy symbol or a lightning bolt on them. When placing them on the board, a player will have to place a worker in one of those locations, the symbols, the wrench, the hat, or the star, and they will get to take one of the worker actions on the board. And then going clockwise around the table, the other players will get to take one of the energy actions associated with that worker. The worker actions are a little more powerful, and then the energy actions are a little bit weaker. Say that I had an energy die here, like this lightning bolt. I can't just put this on any location. I have to put it on a location that I've already placed a worker die. These aren't quite as good as the other dice. And if I were to place one of these on here, I don't get to take one of the worker side actions. I have to take one of the energy side actions. But then once a player has placed all their dice on the main board, they then take all of those dice and put them on their structure board. And they have to put them on the matching emblems. Throughout the game, you will be purchasing some of these buildings and placing them on your structure board, and then you will get to activate those buildings with those dice. And when activating the buildings on your structure board, you don't really spin the dice. It's just kind of like a prerequisite that you need to have to be able to activate the dice. Some of the different buildings that you'll have on your structure board will require 1 die. Some of them may require more than 1 die. Some of them might be in-game points. Some of them you might even be able to activate multiple times if you're able to put multiple dice on there. But when you trigger those, you can trigger them in any order that you like. You just slide them down on your structure board as a reminder that you have activated that building this turn. And at the end of your turn, you do get to reset those, so you can use those buildings over and over and over again. And what are some of those actions on the board? Well, a lot of them will give you resources, such as this one here will give you 2 food. And it seems that the board is laid out in a manner in which stuff kind of goes clockwise. So if I go here at this location, it gives me food, and I can use the food to build buildings at the next location. That location over there gives me money, and I can use that money to then buy buildings at the next location. That location gives me steel, and I use steel to purchase buildings back at that original food location. It took me a couple plays before I realized that that was kind of a circular thing there, but I'm also kind of an idiot. But once I discovered that, it made strategizing quite a bit easier. However, speaking of the board and the layout, there is a very bizarre thing that 2 of the 3 locations, the worker action is on the left and the energy action is on the right. Except for this one here, it's the opposite, where the energy action is on the left and the worker action is on the right. I cannot think of any reason why they would have done that, but be prepared for players to get that jumbled up and possibly take wrong actions, especially if they're not the active player and they're taking the energy action side. They're gonna think, oh, I can turn 2 steel into 2 point. Oh, no, you can't. You can only turn 1 steel into 1 point. Sorry. So let's take a closer look at some of those actions. Here are the top hat actions. Up here, these are obvious. This gives you money. Down here, this lets you turn in a steel and a food to upgrade one of the plus signs on your board. These down here let you turn in a steel or a food into money. And then these down here allow you to buy the buildings. Now this allows the active player with his worker die to get a 1 food discount on one of these buildings, or he can spend an extra coin to buy one of the other 2 buildings available around the board. And when you purchase one of these buildings, the buildings that are left do get shifted over to the right, lowering their cost, and then a new one is added. And these star actions here, these give you food. They allow you to turn steel into victory points, and then this one lets you spend money to flip over those waste tokens, and similar to the other section, allows you to buy buildings. These spaces here give you steel. These here let you turn food into straight up victory points, and this here lets you spend 6 doll hairs to upgrade the section on your player board that gives you extra dice to roll each round, which can come in handy. And then same purchasing as the previous. And all the resources that you gain during the game and spend, they are limited to what you can show on your lovely dual layered player board. However, those particular spaces that allow you to upgrade your board, those are some of the upgrades that you can perform, where you flip those sections of your player board over to reveal even more dual layered player boards to allow you to gain and store more of those resources. And similar to that, just when you thought you were running out of space on your structure board, same thing there. You can flip those bad boys over and get even more buildings, which is kind of tough in my opinion to get 5 buildings of one kind. So why would, well, I guess you would do it to get the points. Anyways, that's War Machine in a nutshell. So I totally enjoy the engine building in this game, and being able to upgrade your board, flipping over the different quadrants, being able to store more goods or get more buildings on your structure board is super awesome. And the production on all of those items is fantastic. The dice are super huge and chunky. I love them. The dual layered player board's nice, thick. Keep all your little markers in place, and the little markers are kind of cute, like the little steel beam thingy. Not really sure that the food is like that pink can of Spam, I presume. I don't know, or pink mush. And I really love the I choose and other players can follow type of mechanism in there, where you choose a stronger action with one of your worker dice, and then the other players get to take the lesser energy action. And it kind of cuts down on the downtime quite a bit, because most of the time it seems like you're always getting something. And the overall aesthetics of the game, I really dig. I think there could have been maybe a little more art like on the building tiles, but then it kind of would have detracted from the iconography on them. But the art style I find very appealing. It's kind of like an old like propaganda, or kind of reminds me of old like KMFDM albums. Are they even around anymore? Am I just like showing how old I am? And I enjoy that the game doesn't outstay its welcome. It's not a very long game, and it's a fairly easy teach. Actually, the game might be a little on the shorter side because it's hard to really get your engine going. But as far as the teach isn't really that bad, or at least it's not nearly as bad as that rulebook. That rulebook, it was not a great rulebook, to be honest. There's just so many questions that arise. And you would think that there would be like a FAQ or something where it shows exactly what each building does, but it doesn't. And you can go and look online, and there's plenty of threads and comments on Board Game Geek where the publisher had to, inform people of how certain things actually work in the game. So the rulebook definitely could have been better. But there's like all these kind of little weird things that don't really make any sense. And looking up information in the rulebook, it was just really difficult, just the layout of it. And some of the games in particular, players would want to take a gander at the rulebook while we're playing, and you see them just like shaking their head. Like, what is this? I even made little stars next to important things in the rulebook, because when you try to find some information that you need to know during gameplay again, it's nearly impossible to find it. It's laid out so poorly. And for instance, the company card, this is the only time it mentions the company card in the whole rulebook, and other than where you deal out 2 and you get to choose one. And due to the nature of the game where a player takes an action and the other players follow and they get little things, going first in this game kind of sucks. And yes, they do kind of try to mitigate that by giving the starting player like a little extra stuff. Like I think they get 1 of everything and 2 money or something like that. But in my opinion, it's just not enough, especially the last round. Or if you're playing a 4-player game and you're only playing 4 rounds and you're going last, and it's the last round, and if you don't roll the correct dice to be able to maybe buy the building that you want or need, maybe it's got some in-game scoring or something on it, you're just kind of SOL. Yes, in the game you can spend 2 dice to basically turn 1 of those dice into anything that you want. But if you only have 3 dice, you're getting rid of 1 of those dice. You're losing 33% of your turn. It's like a huge deficit that you got to take on to be able to do that. But if you just don't get the dice that you need, you either take that huge hit or you don't get to build that building. And then you're hoping that the other players maybe take that corresponding action, so that way you can build that building that you want, but they might not take that action, and if they do, they might buy the building that you want. It's just every game of this that we played, whoever went first felt like they were getting pooped on, especially at the beginning and end of the game. But overall, I feel like this game was a good design, and I like the way that you can upgrade your player board, and the components for the most part are really nice. The huge dice, the dual-layered player boards. But with every play, I found myself not having as much fun as I thought I was going to. So I do think there are some people out there though that will enjoy this game much more than I did. However, at this time, I'm not really convinced that this game's going to be added to my collections of games. I'll probably hang on to it for a little bit, and if somebody sees it on the shelf and wants to play it, I'll play it. But it just didn't really grab me like I wanted it to. I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 5. I found it to be pretty meh. And if you've played it and maybe you've had a different experience, leave a comment down below. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe it's just the groups I played it with, which I've played it with different groups and it kind of was meh every time. But let me know your thoughts on it down below. And that's how we're going to wrap up this review, with meh, because I never know how to end it. Meh. Oh, and another thing that's pretty awesome too is everything has a matte finish. So when you're recording footage and B-roll for this game, you don't really have much reflection on the board. That was super cool.